Previously on
Mathematologiste.
Now we got another different problem here. So we have x squared plus x minus 6. So first of all, again, we're going to just label out what each term is. So we're going to say that's x squared is a, the x would be b, and then minus 6, the negative 6 would be c, right? So we're just comparing it to the general formula again. And we're going to write down the coefficients, right? The coefficients, the respective coefficients here. There's nothing in front, then there's a 1. So a is 1, b is 1, and c is negative 6. So same thing like last time, we're trying to find two numbers that when multiplied equal to the c value, which as we know is negative 6. And then two numbers that when we add together, the same two numbers, would equal to 1. Alright, so again, just like the previous question, we're going to list out all the factors of 6, right? So that's 1, 2, 3, and 6, just like the previous question. And now we're going to look at something that is of particular interest. So, after analyzing the factors a little bit, we can notice that 2 and 3 are again of interest, right? But you might be wondering to yourself, well, how can it be, right? Like 2 and 3, when you add it together, they equal 5. When multiplied, they equal negative 6, right? And this is where we have to kind of stretch our brains a little bit, and we have to play with the signs. We can actually play with the signs, right? So in this situation, we can say negative 2 and 3. Because negative 2 times 3 would equal negative 6. Negative multiplied by positive is a negative. And negative 2 plus 3 is 1, right? So that's something else you can also do. Not only can you sort of, play around with the factors a little bit, but you can also play around with their signs to get your desired result. So in this situation, negative 2 and 3 work, and we're just going to put it in the same formatting as we did in the previous question. So that's x minus 2 times x plus 3. Alright, so another question here. You can probably try to attempt this on your own now that you've seen 2 questions already. Pause the video here, or you can just watch me work my way through the question. So again, we're going to be multiplying the we're going to be listing out the coefficients together. So that's a is 1, b is going to be 6, and c is 8. It's just like the previous questions. Now we're going to be finding two numbers, right? And we're going to represent them as p and q. When p and q are multiplied together, they have to equal to the c value, right? They have to equal to the c value, which is 8. And then when they're added together, they have to equal to the b value, which is 6, right? So 8, 6, just to reiterate. So now, just like we did in the previous questions, we're going to be listing out the factors of the c term. So that will be listing out the factors of 8, and that'll be 1, 2, 4, and 8, right? So there's 4 factors of 8 in total. And 2 and 4 is of particular interest because, when 2 and 4 are multiplied, they equal to 8, and when 2 and 4 are added, they equal to 6. And that's basically it.
Alright, now that you've hopefully got the hang of it, let's try to move on to something a little bit more complicated, time to sink our teeth into something more challenging. So there should be 2 things that strike you immediately. First of all, a is no longer 1, right? A is 2 now. And second of all, the method that we've used over the past couple of questions do not apply here. So it doesn't matter what brackets you end up with, it won't multiply to get you 2x squared minus 4x minus 6, right? So that previous method doesn't work anymore. And just with any other good old factorization problem, we're going to write out what a, b, and c are. So as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, it's right there. And don't get me wrong, we're still trying to find we're still trying to find 2 numbers. But now, here's the kicker, right? So these 2 numbers, when multiplied, have to equal to a times c instead of just c. And these same 2 numbers, when they're added to each other, they equal to b, right? Oh, I wrote number 4. They equal to b. Just to kind of reiterate that a little bit, I'm going to write this in purple. P times Q has to equal to A times C. A is 2, C is negative 6. Multiply them together, you get negative 12. And P plus Q is just b, right? So it stays as is. And now instead of factoring out the -6 or the c term of the main question, we're going to be writing out each individual factor of 12, which is the a times c value. So just listing out all the individual factors of 12. You can see there's 6 of them. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. And you kind of play around with them, kind of mess with them a little bit, play around with the signs, play around with numbers, and hopefully, right, you just change the color of my pen. Hopefully you'll come to the conclusion that 6 and 2 are of particular interest. More specifically, -6 and +2, right? And it satisfies p times q and p plus q, because -6 times 2 would be -12, and -6 plus 2 would be -4. And now we're going to do something called splitting the middle term. So you see that -4x over there in the main question? We're just going to replace it with the two newfound numbers that we have. So we have -6 and 2, and we're just going to replace the -4x with those two new numbers. And now we're going to we're going to split it in half, right? We're going to work on it. We're going to work on each half separately. So we're going to take 2x squared and 2x and -6x minus 6. And we're going to work on them individually. So now what we do is we factor out the common term. In this case, it'd be 2x, x plus 1, right? And then for the second portion, -6x minus 6, we figure out that -6 is the common term here. So -6 times x and plus 1. Now you'll realize that, wait a minute, there's the same term in the brackets for both portions of the expression. So yeah, you got x plus 1 on both. You have x plus 1 occurring on both ends. And then you have the individual terms appearing on both ends as well. So now you're just going to group the outsiders in one bracket, and you group the x plus 1 in the second bracket, and you finally arrive at that answer right there. All right, guys, do not despair if you didn't really get the previous question. We got one that's way worse than that. So instead of a being 2, a is now 3. So the a's are only really going to get any bigger. But I mean, generally, it's the same thing all over again. I'm gonna list out what A, B, and C are. I'm pretty sure you're kind of bored of this already, but we're gonna persevere. It's the last question in the video. P times Q has to equal to A times Q, so A times C. So two numbers when multiplied has to equal to A times C, and those same two numbers when added to each other have to equal to B. Just to reiterate that, P times Q has to equal to A times C, which is 3 times 8, that's 24. And then you have the same two numbers. When they're added together, they're going to have to equal to B, which is simply -10. Now we're going to take the A times C value, and we're going to factorize it. We're going to list out all of its factors, all of its individual factors. So that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12, and last but not least, 24. So, after we kind of play around with the factors, try fiddling with the signs, and we get to the conclusion that 4 and 6 are particularly, they're particularly special in this situation. More specifically, it'd be -4 and -6, right? And to kind of prove that this case stands, I mean, -4 negative p times q, which would be -4 times -6 would equal to 24, right? Which satisfies p times q is equal to a times c, and -4 plus -6 is equal to -10, which satisfies p plus q is equal to b. So now what we do is we take the b term of the main question, and we're going to split it. So just like the previous question, we're going to split the middle term. We're going to write the two numbers that we found, the two newfound numbers. We're going to write them separately. So that'd be 3x squared minus 6x minus 4x plus 8. Then all we have to do is you have to take the first two terms and we factor out the common term. And then we take the last two terms and we factor out the common term here. So in the first two terms, here we have 3x squared minus 6x. 3x appears to be the most common term here. So 3x times x would be 3x squared, and negative 2. 3x times negative 2 would be negative 6x. And for these last two terms of the expression, the second portion of the manipulated expression here, we get that negative 4 is the common term, and we multiply by x and negative 2. So just like the previous question, we have the same terms repeating inside the brackets, and then you have the two outsiders, and all you have to simply do is you group the outsiders together in one bracket, and you group the ones that are repeating on the second bracket. And there you go. That's your final answer right there. And if you don't believe it for yourself, you can try expanding the bracket that we eventually reach to, and you can see that it will result into the original question once fully simplified. And with all that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video, even if you didn't really watch the entire thing because most of it wasn't really relevant to you. That's totally fine. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one.